Well, good day to all of you out there, and good night if it's currently night where you're at. My name is Stephen Fight, and I will be your host for today's webinar featuring Jody Martin as she presents classroom management strategies for little learners. How are you doing, Jody?
I'm fantastic, thank you.
Great. Is it
Excited
cool
about
over
doing this training.
Is it cooler over
Is it,
there in Colorado than it is here in Oklahoma?
well, I don't know. It's in the 80s, I think. So
No,
never
you're
as
making
cool as you think in Colorado.
all right. Very cool. Well, it's warm here. So, hey, we are so excited that you're all with us today. I know Jody has been prepping quite a while for this presentation, and she's got a lot of amazing and wonderful information to share with all of you. Just a little bit about me before we move on. My name is Stephen Fight. I'm a children's artist out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I've been presenting workshops and concerts for children and teachers since 1985. There's information about me right there on your screen. You can follow me on social media. You can go to my website, all sorts of fun things that you can take part in there. And as usual, Froxry has asked me to share just a couple of fun tunes to get us started. And today, instead of doing recorded music, I'm going to do a couple of quick little piggyback things that kind of fit in with what Jody's going to be presenting today, transitions and songs to start our days and even end our days. So I've got a little song here, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along with me. Our circle time is here. Sung to Farmer and Adele. I always love piggyback songs in the classroom because a lot of times we don't, as teachers, have time to go find a recording of a certain song that we want to use at the spur of the moment. So we can always pull out a piggyback song and it will help us in managing our classroom. So this one goes, our circle time is here. Gather around and sit right down. Our circle time is here. I always find that the shorter, the better. Attention grabbers for children. And if you don't call it circle time anymore, you can always use morning meeting time or morning time, however you want to do it. So that's just one little fun song we can begin our day with. And this is a song that I came up with a couple of months ago in prepping for a fun workshop down in Texas. And it's sung to Happy Birthday to You. And it's a bilingual representation of a great good morning song. So, Buenos dias a ti, buenos dias a ti, buenos dias, mis amigos, buenos dias a ti, good morning to you, good morning to you, good morning, my friends, good morning to you. And then once everybody knows everybody's name in the classroom, which is probably a fact by now, you can start naming off individual children and say, Buenos dias, Stephen. Buenos dias, Stephen. Buenos dias, mi amigo. Buenos dias, Stephen. In fact, you can start naming names and say, Buenos dias, Stephen. Buenos dias, Michelle. Buenos dias, Rachel. And just keep going on and on and on during your morning meeting time or circle time. Now, this is a fun little tune that was written by some kindergarten teachers in Tulsa, Oklahoma, quite a few years ago when we were doing a workshop out there. And it was just a short little curt song that you can use to transition your children to the potty time. And it's sung to bingo. There is a place we need to go, and potty is its name. Oh, P-O-T-T-Y, 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 and potty is its name. Oh, one of my favorite all-time piggyback songs that you can use in your classroom. And last but not least, this is a little tune I came up with this morning in prepping for this wonderful workshop that you're getting ready to see. And it's sung to Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And it's just a fun way to end our day without recorded music, but just singing it a cappella with your children. Now it's time to say goodbye. Our day is at an end. But before we leave, let's say goodbye to all our friends, with a goodbye here and a goodbye there, here a bye, there a bye, everywhere a goodbye. Now it's time to say goodbye. Goodbye, so long, friends. And if you want to include names of the children and point them out, you could sing with a goodbye, Stephen, and a goodbye, Rachel, a goodbye, Alexandria, and a goodbye, Ishmael. And you can even add some little tags in there, let the children do something for you physically. We could say, with a goodbye, Stephen, Stephen, touch your nose to make sure they're paying attention, and a goodbye, Ishmael, Ishmael, touch your head. Or you can even praise them and say, with a goodbye, Stephen, you did an amazing job during cleanup time today. And a goodbye, Rochelle, thank you so much for being a wonderful role model for all of our students. Now it's time to say goodbye. Goodbye, so long, friends. So I hope that you use piggyback songs in your classroom because they will fit right in line with what Jody will be presenting today on managing your classroom. As we said, Frog Street is a sponsor, and there are some wonderful benefits for joining EdWeb and for joining the Early Childhood Learning Solutions community. You can view EdWebinar recordings, especially the past ones that are in the archives. You can earn your CE certificates. You can download slides in the chat logs, just like Jody will be presenting today. She has a ton of slides and information to share with you, and you'll be able to download all that and look at it. And you can join online discussions and get free resources. So if you are not a member, we would love for you to join edweb.net. It is absolutely free, and there is a wonderful, wonderful bevy of resources waiting for you. Well, my time here is done for the present time anyway, so I would love to bring Jody to the stage right now. So Jody, the stage is yours. Have a wonderful time today.
Thank you so much for that wonderful kickstart to this training on classroom management. So my name is Jody Martin, and I am the Professional Learning Content Manager at Frog Street. What that means is I write curriculum, I write trainings, and I present, like this webinar today. I've been doing this career being in the early childhood industry for about 35 years. I started out teaching preschool, like many of you, and was assistant director, and then worked at the corporate office of two childcare companies, national childcare companies. So I've had a lot of experience over the years teaching or working with teachers and coaching and training and guiding them in classroom management, which is a big, big topic and near and dear to all of our hearts. I've also authored several resources that address the classroom landscape, classroom management, classroom design, and talk a little bit about that as we go. So I've done all those different things in the industry. I'm a wife, a mom, and my probably most favorite job of all is grandma to these precious grandchildren. On this slide, there's 7 of them, but I just had a brand new grandbaby on Saturday. So I have 8 grandchildren, a newborn, a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, 2 4-year-olds, a 5-year-old. I've got all the age groups. So I am so very blessed that they live near me and they all come to Sunday dinner. And I'll tell you what, I need classroom management strategies in my home on Sundays. So hopefully I can apply some of those, but it's quite fun. So, all right, let's get on with what we're going to look at this afternoon. So today, hopefully you will better understand and be able to implement some of the primary and secondary classroom management strategies that I'll be talking about, and establish rules, routines, and transitions to help guide your students, because that is a big part of classroom management. And then recognize various sources of stress and strategies to help alleviate it. Because if there's stress in the classroom, either from you or the students, it doesn't matter how organized you are, that's going to kind of stop things up. So looking at reinforcing positive behavior and implementing effective strategies to handle challenging behavior, because I know that that is why you're all here, because it is a big, big part of your job and can be very frustrating. So any tips I know that you can get will be helpful. So we'll try to go over some of those for you. And then looking at the physical environment as well, because you can have all of these other strategies in place, but if your physical environment is not set up in a certain way, it could also interfere with how your classroom flows. So that's what we're going to be looking at. All right, let's get on our way then. I think of classroom management as sort of a puzzle that you need to put together, and there's lots of different pieces to the puzzle. Hopefully today I will show you what those puzzle pieces are and help you put that puzzle together. So I look at it, some of the things I'm going to talk to you about are like corner pieces. They're things that are no-brainers. You're probably already doing them. You'll be able to go, I got it. I have the corner pieces done. And then there's going to be some pieces that are more like the middle pieces. And as you could see on this slide, not quite as defined, not as obvious as to where you place them, but nonetheless, there are pieces that need to be completed to finish this puzzle. So let's take a look at those pieces. Let's start with the definition of classroom management. And this is from the Handbook of Classroom Management, which was written by Evertson and Weinstein in 2006. And they define classroom management as the actions taken to create an environment that supports and facilitates academic and social emotional learning. So that pretty much covers it. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about. But what I like to show you is the teacher's perspective. When you talk to teachers, and you guys probably would agree with this, it really comes down to the process of ensuring that your classroom lessons run smoothly despite those disruptive behaviors by students. Once again, it's a big part of your focus every day is to try to help curtail some challenging behaviors and interruptions. So I know that is your focus, and that's what we're going to be looking at helping you out with today. So what I'd like you to do is think about these things. What are your values as a teacher, and what are your goals? What do you think your strengths and your weaknesses are? And you might at some point in time just kind of jot those down. And then what do you think an early childhood classroom should look like? What's your idea of the perfect setup? What are the behaviors that are acceptable to you and which ones are not? And then what situations really challenge you? And they could be different for each, person in your program or in your co-teachers or other colleagues. But what are and how do you usually respond to challenging situations? So what are your situations that challenge you? And then how are you responding? And maybe there's a need to kind of do something a little bit different. How do you engage the children in the learning process? Because that's a big part of classroom management. And then, of course, the physical space in the classroom. Does it encourage engagement and independence in the children? And then how do your interactions with the children reflect those goals and those values that you have in your perspective? So kind of keep those in mind as we're looking at some of the strategies today. So the National Council on Teacher Quality outlines these primary classroom management strategies, and we're going to look at each of these individually: rules, routines, transitions, behavior management, and engagement. These are the primary ones. A little bit later, we're going to look at a couple of the secondary ones as well. So rules. I'm imagining that it doesn't matter whether you're an infant, toddler, preschool teacher, that there's some kind of rules that you have in your classroom. It may be written rules like you see here. There may be a chart. It may be just sort of not written rules, but consistent things that you ask the children to do. For example, a toddler teacher might say, we don't climb on the shelving units. We climb on the climbing equipment in the gross motor area. So even if you don't write those rules down, because a toddler isn't going to be reading those rules, there's certain things that you're consistent with in the classroom, and you know the rules, and other teachers know the rules, and the parents probably know the rules, and we remind the children of those rules or guidelines. Rules might be a little too structured for those younger children. But for a 3 to 5 year old, you could have something simple like this. We listen, we share, we use gentle voices, we walk inside, we keep our hands and feet to ourselves. You're going to know which of the specific rules that you want to use with your group of children. It's helpful if you have some kind of rule cues or pictures or icons. In the Frog Street curriculum, we use conscious discipline. It's embedded in there, and we have commitments that the children can make each day. And initially, they're guided to make those commitments as we teach them about them, but eventually they choose their own commitments because that's what's meaningful for them. And they're very common things like listening ears, using gentle hands, gentle touches, using your big voice, which is being confident, sharing, using walking feet, those kinds of things. I think with this age group, especially the 3 to 5 year olds, and maybe even the older toddlers, seeing a picture is going to remind them, in addition to you saying what the rule is. And if you use real pictures of children doing these rules or these commitments, that's all the better. The other thing, and I would say rules would be a corner piece, and the other corner piece would be routines. I'm guessing that either your agency or licensing, or if you're trying to get accredited, or maybe a quality ratings system in your state, they're all requiring that you have some kind of a daily schedule or a routine that you follow. And it's interesting because brain research tells us that the brain thrives on patterns, and routines are basically patterns, right? We all love our routines. We don't want to know when we come into work that something's changed because we have it in our mind the way the day is going to go. Sometimes that happens and we have to roll with it. But to have a plan and have a routine in place that's, a daily schedule is going to be so important. So that's another corner piece. That's probably something that's a no-brainer. I'm guessing you're already doing. When you're looking at your schedule, of course, you have to consider the arrival and the departure times. Nap time's usually built in there, breakfast, lunch, and probably 2 snacks. Time for self-help skills, which is a big part of our job with working with early childhood students, is that we're teaching those things, and it takes time. And then, of course, there's cleanup. And that's also a very teachable moment when we're having children help us clean up. And then there's time that we need to take from transitioning from one activity to another. And there's so many times during the day that you transition. And so some of the ideas that Stephen gave us at the very beginning are wonderful and very simple, quick ways to have children be distracted enough to leave one activity and move on to another. So you want to make sure that there's probably a little bit of teacher directed time, but a lot of child initiated and free choice activities in your schedule. So there's a lot of things that you have to consider on a daily basis and try to fit in. So a visual schedule, just like having a visual rule, a chart available, is going to be the best, because children obviously at this age aren't necessarily reading. Maybe some of the older 4s might be able to recognize some of the words, but having a picture so they can get an idea of how their schedule is going to go, what's going to come next, or when are they going to go outside. We need to first have story time and then snack time, and then we go outside, so they can see that pictorial timeline, so to speak, of what's going to go on. And that helps them feel more comfortable because they have a little bit of control, or they have an awareness of what is to come. And they, that's being respectful of them, sharing that with them. So a visual schedule is a nice way to go. And whether you do icons, cartoon icons like you see here, you take real pictures of the children washing their hands and putting their coats on to go outside and eating their snack or reading their stories. A visual schedule is going to be most appropriate for this age group. Okay, so you have your routines and you have your rules. Transitions is a big part of your day. I can't say enough about transitions, and that's excellent reason why Stephen shared some with us earlier, so that you'd have some things to take with you and do right away. So looking at transitions, they take place when children move from one environment or a routine or an activity to another. So think about it. They come in, they have breakfast, they move to maybe center time, they move to story time, they move to snack time, they move to outdoor time, they come back in. I mean, there are so many transitions, and that a lot of change in a schedule can cause some disruption in your classroom environment. So anytime you can use a transition activity to help that go along a little easier or smoother is going to be really important. So there's some helpful tips for transitions, and some of these, I'm sure that you're doing it, you've known this forever. Tell the little ones what's coming next. Sometimes we forget to do that, but really it's so very important. And establish that daily schedule, because the brain does seek patterns. The brain does thrive on patterns. And when you're consistent, when you have consistent routines, we're comfortable, children are comfortable, and that's better learning happens when we're comfortable in our environment. And understand that it does take a few minutes for the brain to kind of tune itself into sensory input. So going from outside to inside, or going from a really active activity to a more quiet activity takes some kind of transition there. You can't expect children to wait, of course. So you use finger plays, you use songs, you use rhymes to sort of entertain the children and help them move along. The other thing you want to do is be sure you plan carefully before beginning a new activity, because it's really hard and disruptive if all the materials aren't there, or if the activity doesn't work. Then you're sort of scrambling and you lose the attention of the children, and that's when kind of the classroom management goes away and becomes more frustrating for everybody involved. There's some great transition activities. I know Dr. Jean and Ray PreK both have YouTube videos about transitions. I think that the Ray PreK has a book called Teachable Transitions. So there's a lot of resources out there to give you great ideas and really easy tricks to help with this part of the day, which of course is all day long. Okay, individual transitions are helpful too. You see here the little girl with just a little tray. It's an individual activity. So let's say she's done with snack and she doesn't want to sit there any longer. Have a little activity set up that she can go and do while she's waiting for the other children to finish snack. Or maybe in the quiet area, a place that a child can go and read a book. Maybe a child needs to warm up before they even join the group in the morning once they get dropped off, and they can kind of go in their little safe space, read a story, or just observe the other children and then join when they feel comfortable. So individual transitions are really helpful too. You do a lot of group ones, but have some space available for the individual ones. So very similar to what Stephen did, here's a song, Are You Listening? That's sung to Are You Sleeping? And my voice is not as good as Stephen's, so I won't sing it, but you can imagine this song with substituting maybe Are You Hungry? Or Are You Tired? Or Are You Excited? Boys and girls, girls and boys. Then, within obviously the next verses relating to those topics. So you can take any song and change it around and make it fit the transition that you need to have happen. All right, so the transition, the routine, the schedules, the rules are maybe some of your corner pieces. And now let's get into the nitty gritty of the middle part that gets a little more complicated. So we have behavior management, and it's big. It's a big share of your puzzle. So we're going to spend some time talking about that, because I know it really is something that you guys focus on a lot. And I felt as a teacher that it really took away from my teaching, and that was frustrating as a teacher. So I can imagine that you're frustrated too. But what we need to remember is that helping children with self-control and building that self-confidence and helping them learn to cooperate, that is our job as early childhood educators. And I wish I knew that when I was that young teacher, that it's okay if you spend a lot of time helping children self-regulate. In our Frog Street curriculums, we have a big share of our program with conscious discipline is dedicated to self-regulation, because children can't learn unless they can self-regulate and they have some self-control and they have that self-confidence and build those social skills, all the time, all the while having that joy in learning, right? We need to make it fun. And of course, we're going to introduce those pre-academic skills that we know that they need when they go into elementary school. So when I was a center director, I talked with teachers and I said, what is it that I need to do with my 4-year-olds to have them ready for your kindergarten program? And what they said unanimously, and this was way back in the 80s, right, when I was directing and teaching, is if a child can separate from their parent, can take instruction from another adult, can work collaboratively with other children, can share, and I can teach them anything, right? If they have those social skills, foundational skills. And I said, of course, well, don't you want them to know their address? Don't you want them to know how to spell their name and all these things that, as a young professional, I thought that's what they wanted. And they said, you know what, that's nice if they can, but really, if they don't have the social emotional skills, we spend all of our time doing that. And that's an elementary school teacher saying that. So as an early childhood teacher, you are going to spend a lot of time doing that, but don't beat yourself up about it. It is a main part of your job. And it is the best gift you will ever give a child, to teach them self-regulation and to have the self-confidence to be successful in school. So when you're spending a lot of time doing it, just know that it is part of teaching. It really is teaching. And And don't be so hard on yourself. Okay, so let's look at some specifics. Ideal behavior management will look like this. And this is ideal behavior management, okay? Let's set that the standard, but achieving it is always the question. So the classroom is organized in a manner that encourages order, participation, independence, and continuous learning. There are a small number of meaningful rules, which we talked about earlier. And then, of course, the students need to understand and reinforce the rules. So you need to, I have a saying, you can't play the game if you don't know the rules. So you have to tell them what it means to have walking feet. You might need to even show them what it means to have walking feet. What is a gentle touch? So we need to be sure that we're giving them the information to go along with the rules and expectations that we have, and that you are consistently teaching independent behavior management skills, because that's going to go a long way for them. That's the self-regulation. And then students who demonstrate appropriate behaviors consistently receive some kind of positive reinforcement for that, praise and encouragement for doing that. If you catch them being kind, you're going to get more kind, right? So, and then of course, handling inappropriate behavior in a firm and fair and a consistent and caring manner. So those are the ideal behavior management guidelines that we want to try to achieve. Some of the reasons for challenging behaviors, I guess I never, when I was a teacher, thought about all these reasons, but it is interesting to see. Sometimes it's for them to escape or avoid an undesirable situation. And guess what? Sometimes group time is an undesirable situation for some children. They don't want to sit. So we have to make sure that we're providing the kind of group time that's more interactive, so that we're meeting all the different kinds of learning styles there. Sometimes children are just trying to get positive or negative attention. So they'll do things to act out just so that they get that attention one way or the other. So they might want that hug or that redirection. They also try to gain access to a desired item or an activity, and they're going to act up because they want it, right? So they want that snack, or they want to go outside. And so they're going to do things to get your attention, hoping that that's what you're going to give them. Then they also access or avoid sensory input sometimes. So some children like to move and to have their body in motion all the time, and some children react negatively to any kind of hug or a touch on the elbow or the shoulder or anything like that. So you kind of have to know your students and decipher what is their challenging behavior really about. And usually underlying all challenging behavior is stress, and we're going to focus on that a little bit in a moment. So some positive guiding techniques: obviously make eye contact and be in close proximity when you're guiding children. Model positive behavior, reteach classroom expectations, revisit the rules or your commitments or your guidelines. Point out when children are doing the right things, catch them being good, make sure that they're getting that recognition. Sometimes you have to regroup and restructure an activity, and you might have to restructure the activity or reformulate the group. It depends on what's going on with that group of children. So if you're sitting down to read a story and most of the group is fidgeting, you might need to stand up and do a movement activity, and then maybe you can read the story. So you also want to encourage self-removal from the group, and that's an approach similar to redirection, but the child, not the adult, changes the circumstances, right? So you want the child to need to approach or sometimes that child's going to need to approach you for assistance in that, but you want to help them be able to know when they need to remove themselves for the group. Offering choices is getting rid of power struggles, right? And empowering children. So when children feel empowered and they're not in a struggle with you, then a lot of things are going to go a lot more smoothly. So offering those choices. And you can figure out choices. Sometimes it's not, are you going to wear a coat or not? It's which coat do you want to wear, right? So offering choices and letting them have that opportunity to be empowered is a wonderful thing. And then you can encourage peer tutoring. And what that means is help individual children interact more frequently with and positively with children that do understand the rules. Maybe they're a little bit older, or they've been in your program longer, and they can role model what is the correct way to play in, appropriate way to play in the block area, or what are the rules in the classroom. Sometimes you do need to redirect, and that really works because it changes the circumstances. So, and if you give reasons why you're redirecting a child, then they might be more readily able to redirect themselves later on. So a lot of different techniques here. Of course, there's distraction, and that alters an emotional state by kind of distracting the child from their angry thoughts that they're having, and you kind of interrupt that and give them something else to think about and make them forget about why they were angry or why they were doing the challenging behavior. Then, of course, there's ignoring. There's certain things that you can ignore because really they want the attention. So ignoring tattling, for example, or whining is something that can be ignored. Biting and hitting can't be ignored. So make sure that you know things that you can ignore with the children. And then there's natural consequences, and then there's logical consequence. And a natural consequence is where you let the environment sort of teach the child. So a natural consequence might be if a child refuses to eat, a little bit later they become hungry. If they don't sleep at nap time, a little bit later they're tired and they're not as anxious to play. If they don't want to put their coat on, they might be a little bit cold on a windy day. So those are natural consequences. A logical consequence is sort of when you set something up, like if you continue to throw blocks in the block center, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the block center. And as the child continues to throw blocks, then they're asked to leave for that morning and try again later in the afternoon. And that's what we call a logical consequence. So I want to talk a little bit about praise and encouragement. Praise tends to be like, that's awesome, that's a great job, high five, you did a good job. And although it's nice to acknowledge children, we really want to make sure that we're being specific, because if you're specific, you will get that behavior again. So I really like the way you stacked the blocks on the shelf after you were done playing with them. Or I really like the way you helped your friend get their coat on. So praise sometimes ends up being a little bit more non-specific. And when we use encouragement, it tends to be more specific and gives children the information that they need to continue to do the positive behavior. So just kind of think about, if you use praise in the right way with being specific, it's okay. But if not, it's just kind of, it makes them feel competitive. Like, well, I did a good job today, but I did that same thing yesterday and you didn't say a good job. So was it a bad job? So it really kind of sets up that competition, and we certainly don't want that. All right, that's a lot of information on challenging behavior, but I have a little bit more. When you have some of the older kids, maybe your older 3s, 4s, and 5s, you can use conflict resolution strategies. And you do that by helping them use I messages instead of you messages. So I feel sad when you take my truck, or I feel sad when I don't have my truck anymore. You want to encourage children to make eye contact during their conversations when you're helping them with conflict resolution. And ultimately, they need to solve their own problems, right? Come up with their own solutions for those problems. You're going to have to help them out at first. And finding appropriate ways to express their anger. And really, they need to understand how they feel to know whether they're angry or not. So articulating their feelings, that's going to take you spending time talking about feelings and pointing out what feelings they are feeling or they're showing. That helps them then be able to talk about how they're feeling and why they're doing what they're doing. So a couple of different ideas for conflict resolution is the friendship table or the talk it over area. So the friendship table is a place that you set up where children can go. And initially you take them to that conflict resolution area, the friendship table, and you guide that conflict resolution. Eventually they'll go there themselves if they get into a situation, or you can say, you guys may need to go on over to the friendship table and try to work this out. If you don't have a table that you can devote to that, it might just be a carpet or an area of the classroom that you can call the talk it over area or the friendship area. So that works really well with the 4s and 5s and some of the older 3s. Okay. So that was a big piece of the puzzle, wasn't it? The next piece is engagement, and I'm not so sure it's a middle piece of the puzzle, but it is sometimes hard to remember to do this when we're trying to teach all the important things that we want to get across. But engagement is about letting the children be a part of the lesson, whether that's having them help you teach or asking questions so that you can understand where they're at and what they know, asking them to share things about their experiences, letting them be interactive with the lesson. You know, in the previous slide where there were lots of children sitting there, at least one child was up at the board. If that happens pretty regularly and pretty quickly, that's good. But if they're all sitting there a lot, you're going to lose them. So letting them ask questions of each other, you asking questions, is going to keep them engaged. All right, so we've got secondary classroom management strategies, and there's several of them here. There's stress we need to take into consideration. There's the physical environment. If you need to assess children, the social, emotional, cultural factors, and then any kind of parent and community engagement. Now, I list all of those just so you know all the pieces of the puzzle, but today I'm only going to have time to go into the stress and the physical environment, which are two of the big ones. So want to make sure that we get that covered. So, you know, looking at stress is a function of the demands placed on a child and his or her ability to meet them. That's basically the definition of stress. And we see stress in so many different ways. So there is developmental stress, which is pretty typical. That might be stranger anxiety for your infants and tots. It might be separation anxiety for children that have never left their parents and this is their first school experience, or if they are infants and tots. It might just be starting school for the first time and the excitement of it, and you know, parents' expectations and what they've told children to expect. Those are all pretty developmental stresses that children are going to have. There's some critical stress too, and that's moving to a new house or school or possibly hospitalization. That becomes a little bit more critical. And then there's catastrophic stress. Unfortunately, sometimes a death of a parent or maybe even a grandparent they're really close to, a natural disaster that we've had in our country over the years, either with the weather or violence. And then child abuse and neglect is also catastrophic stress for children. And you probably didn't realize, and I didn't at first either until I started to do some training on this, but when we're stressed, we release 1,400 different biochemicals into our body. And that's going to affect how we perceive and how we learn and how we behave. So at the crux of probably most challenging behaviors is some sort of stress. And there's two main biochemicals that I know you've heard of, and that's adrenaline and cortisol. Now, adrenaline is not always bad. Adrenaline is sort of our fight or flight, and we need that. So you guys have fire drills all the time, and you're like, okay, it's another fire drill. Every month we do this. Let's get the kids out. Hurry, hurry, hurry. But suppose you smelled smoke and the fire alarm went off. That would be a whole different level of stress, right? That's the fight or flight, which gets you up and moving fast. So it's not a bad thing, but if we're in a constant state of adrenaline flowing, it's toxic. Now, cortisol is released when there's negative emotions. So when a child or you are stressed or frustrated or angry or sad, cortisol is released into our system. And it's toxic in a sense that it washes over synapses. So here you are teaching children, and there's cortisol present because of whatever stresses they have in their life, and it washes out those wonderful synapses that you're helping to wire in the brain. So we want to make sure that we're doing things that help alleviate stress, what we call at Frog Street, disengaging the stress response as part of our conscious discipline routine. So you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can do that by breathing and by moving and getting your endorphins flowing, which are your feel-good brain chemical. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, but here's some symptoms of stress. And there's probably some of these things that you've seen in children. I hope that you haven't seen all of these things in a child, but They may get headaches. You may just see their anxiety through fidgeting. You can see their anger or their tension. You know the kids as it's building. You can actually see it building. There may be some depression or mood swings that you're aware of. They have trouble concentrating. Sometimes that's hard to see in a young child because obviously their attention span isn't that long anyway, but you see it through acting out, whether they're touching or disrupting others, or they're biting or they're hitting. Sometimes in the older kids, you're going to see lying or possibly bullying, the defying of authority, and there's children that just cling to you and they have fears. You may see increased or decreased appetite. So those are some symptoms of stress. Now, how do you support stressed children? Well, one way is to unite through singing, because when you sing, you release endorphins, and that, once again, is your feel-good brain chemical, and that helps. Endorphins are like a memory fixative. So when we have endorphins, we feel better, but we also learn better. So having children, when you sing, when they sing, when you move, there's a saying that movement is like miracle grow for the brain. So moving and singing are the best way to get those endorphins flowing and try to counteract that stress. Also, sensory and physical activities. Sensory, there's nothing better than warm water or pounding Play-Doh when a child's frustrated and needs to relax. So, of course, following your routines and your schedules. Remember, the consistency, the routine equals comfort. And when we're comfortable, we feel better. Offering those choices, there's choices, comes up all the time, so that children are empowered. And then providing proper rest and good nutrition, which I know you do in your licensed childcare programs or home care, giving the children their naps and making sure they're eating right. And then also just having an area for them to calm down and reflect and regroup, kind of like a safe place for them is really going to be important. So yoga is a great stress buster activity. So if you do yoga with children, there's YouTube videos, there's little programs that you can purchase. It's all about breathing, it's about stretching, it's about moving and calming. So yoga is a great thing to do with the kids. So here's some tips to decrease stress, and some of these I've covered, so let's review. Establish a consistent schedule and routine for daily events. Make sure that you're concentrating on building and nurturing your relationship with each child, and accept and acknowledge and celebrate their individual differences. Whoop, looks like we went over to one, sorry. Include plenty of time for self-directed play. They need that. Offer choices. Emphasize cooperation and minimize competition in this program, in your program. Be sure and warmly greet children as they arrive. Let them know they're welcome and that you're happy to see them. Always listen when children share their ideas and reflect back to them what you heard them say. That makes them feel important. And then recognize when children master a skill that they've been working on and acknowledge that and celebrate that. Make sure that activities are developmentally appropriate and they're open-ended and their process rather than product, as much time as you can do that. Find something you like about every child every day and tell them that. There's nothing better than just feeling like somebody found something that they like about you. It goes a long way. Okay, another big chunk, and we're getting to our end of our time here, so I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly, is the physical environment, because you can have all those other puzzle pieces in place and, your classroom management. You're thinking, I've got this down, but if your environment doesn't flow and is too cluttered and, some other things I'm going to show you in the slides, then all those other things aren't going to work and fall into place. So let's look at the physical environment. First of all, the arrangement, the way you arrange a classroom, you want to make sure that you can differentiate between the interest areas, and so can the children, and that they know there's different places that they can go that interest them, and that it's not a lot of wide open space. So you see in the picture here that this is an obvious little manipulative area, or science and sensory area. So you can see that it's defined by the shelving units and by the tables that are around it. A classroom that has too much open space does kind of is conducive to running, and then children aren't focused and they're sort of distracted and going from place to place, and they really don't kind of light in one place to focus on an activity that they can really get into. So a well-organized and planned environment is going to almost invite the children in and be really obvious what they're going to work on in that area. Is it manipulatives? Is it puzzles? Is it art or science? Is it a quiet area? Then placement of furniture helps define an area. You could see this is obviously building and construction just by the things that are on the shelves and the way the construction table is positioned in that same area. Then you have rugs. Rugs are a great way to define an area and to set boundaries. And also to kind of anchor that area. So dramatic play can get really spread out, and it should be a bigger area, but you also want to confine the dramatic play. Maybe if blocks is next to it, it can bleed into that, but help children know that this is where they do that pretend play, and right next to it may be something else that they're going to focus on. Here's a great example of how a rug really anchored this room. You can see on the right side here these sinks. Not an ideal classroom, but sometimes you have to work with what you have, right? So, but putting this rug here really says, here is the comfortable area. Here is an area to gather and to relax. And you almost don't even realize there's sinks off to the side because here's the focal point. So rugs can do a lot to help delineate different interest areas. Obviously, you're going to have some loud areas and you're going to have some quiet areas, and hopefully they're not next to each other if you can help it. But they're both important in a classroom to have available. Look at the slide on the left. I don't know how to describe it except for I get a pit in my stomach when I look at a picture like this. It's overstimulating. There's too much going on, and it doesn't allow for a child to be calm and focused. Whereas you look at the picture on the right, and the colors are a little bit more calming. There's not as much on the walls. And so color really does matter in the classroom. Sometimes you can't help it. You have the furniture you have, but you'll want to curtail how much color you put on the walls maybe at that point. Okay, make sure that you have interesting and inviting things in your interest areas too. This is a way that you entice a child to maybe do something they normally wouldn't do. Maybe they don't ever go into the science area, but if you put some shells or logs or different kinds of rocks, then it becomes an exploration more of, and it really enriches the classroom or that interest area. Always have storage on low shelves. Licensing is going to look for this. It's a requirement. The other thing going on in this picture is what we call curvilinear furniture, and we talk about it in the book that my co-authors and I wrote about classroom design. And it is more conducive to socialization and children feeling welcome and more secure. And so even the shape of your furniture is going to matter in how your classroom environment feels. The classroom on the left, once again, that feeling in your stomach that, oh, this isn't quite right. There's a lot going on the walls. You look at the classroom on the right, you should have 20% of your walls clear. That's a rule, 20%. So be looking at your walls to see if there's too much going on. I know you have a lot of different things to teach, but maybe do them on flip charts that can be brought in, brought out, and not left up all the time. Enrichments, once again, just adding some zoo animals to the block area really changes the play. Put some greenery in there, foliage, or other elements of nature, and just really see how the children play differently. Try to replace some of your plastic with natural items, and it is just a whole different ballgame for them. And sometimes cheaper. So clutter, you want to make sure that you don't have clutter in your classroom. I look at this classroom and I'm not even sure where to play, where to look, where to go. And if I did go in here, I'm kind of stuck in here. So think about how you arrange the furniture. Looking at something like this is less cluttered, more spread out. You can see differentiation in where the children can go. Lots of different places to go. They're not trapped in the middle. Too much or just right? So you look at the picture on the left. This is great to have all these supplies. What a lucky program that has so many supplies. My recommendation would be to ration them out, right? Rotate them out. Put just a certain amount. You know this for the little kids. The more you put out, the more they dump. A little bit older, they don't always dump, but it is overwhelming to try to choose something. So plus it makes it more special when they get new things enriched in their learning centers. So think about these things. What materials do your students use frequently? If you're trying to declutter, where can these materials be put for easy access? Are there materials that are outdated or haven't been used lately? Do you still need to hang on to them? Do you have enough storage? Oh, we never have enough storage, right? That's a silly question. Could I store materials in a better way, though? Maybe that's it. Is there a better place to put student work in folders so that maybe you can get some of those boxes out of the way? Okay, also remember that there's the adult perspective, which you see on the left. When you're an adult, you walk into a classroom, you see everything clearly. You can see all the different areas. You can see what's on top of the shelves and the tables to do. But when you're a child, look at the right. You walk into the classroom and you might just see a sea of chairs and tables, right? So you want to make sure that you arrange your classroom so that your children are seeing what's fun in your classroom and what might interest them. Be intentional about encourage socialization, right? You've got to have benches for gathering or small little nooks and crannies that they feel like they can, a tent or a clubhouse or something that they can play in. And then look in your room. When you peek in your room through the door, what does it look like? Does it look like you want to go in and have fun? Does it look like the children and the families are welcome? Try to think about what the view is from the door. So you have a space and you have a place. And a space is the walls and the doors and the windows and the ceilings. And, there's probably little socialization or emotional connection. It really has minimal importance. But a place is what you want to have going on in your classroom. It has emotional relations. There's significant connections. You have personal interactions, really a connection to the community. It feels like a school community. Children share and make stories there, and there's positive memories. And that's what we call experiencing deeply. When you're experiencing deeply is when it's a meaningful environment. So remember that a place is a piece of the environment that has been claimed by feelings, and we are homesick for places. And the catalyst that converts any physical location into a place is the process of experiencing deeply. So if your classroom management is rolling along, you have all your puzzle pieces in place, your children are going to be able to experience deeply in the classroom, and so will you. And it'll be a great learning experience, optimal learning experience. So I hope that you have some awareness of other puzzle pieces that you will have to use in your classroom for optimizing learning and through classroom management. Think about what are the pieces that you might need to complete your puzzle. And good luck and have fun creating this classroom management environment that you all get to experience deeply and have meaningful interactions. Lots of information for you guys. I'm sure there's questions.
Yeah, Jody, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Totally shocked that you made it through all your slides.
I know. I feel like a motor mouth.
Exactly. For those of you out there, we were talking before we came on, and this is a presentation that usually is a 6-hour presentation. Is that right, Jody?
You're right. I do a face-to-face 6-hour presentation on classroom management, right?
That she condensed into about 55 minutes. So thank you so much. That was wonderful. Yeah, we do have some questions. So let's get to those immediately here. So First question from Mariana Villarreal. She would like to know, would these transition strategies and classroom behavior management strategies also work or apply towards K through 3rd grade as well?
Absolutely. I think that there's definitely the challenging behaviors and the transitions and the classroom setup that would work for the older children. And for sure the rules, right? They would understand those better than the 0 to 3 or 3 to 4-year-olds. So I think that there are a lot of the classroom strategies that would pertain to elementary school. And I think that the Handbook of Classroom Management by Evertson and Weinstein that I used to do some research previously did talk about elementary school settings too. So that might be a resource that you want to look at.
Fantastic. Leela says, we have several children who negatively affect others with their screaming when having to delay gratification. The others then start
Right.
to scream like their peers. It's like a wildfire in the classroom. Do you
I
have
can imagine.
any advice for Leela?
Oh gosh, I just think all those different strategies that I talked about, and there's a wonderful resource that was written by William DeMayo, and it's called When Nothing Else Works, What Early Childhood Professionals Can Do to Reduce Challenging Behaviors. And it's a wonderful resource. It was written in 2013. He has so many great suggestions in there. So all of those things that I outlined in this training and just sort of gave you a little definition of and a little example of, he really flushes out in his book. So I would recommend that. But really, it's trying a lot of different things, and different things work with different children. So it's never an exact science, unfortunately. And that's why it's a big share of your day. It really is. So breathe. Do calming strategies, take in lots of singing to get those endorphins going, and try to work with it.
Idea. Jody, what was the name of that book and the author again?
It is William DeMayo is the author, and it's called When Nothing Else Works. And I think you could probably find it on that, but the rest of the title is What Early Childhood Professionals Can Do to Reduce Challenging Behaviors.
Ooh, that's a long subtitle. All right, very good.
I know.
All right,
When nothing
Jennifer,
else works, just keep that
yep.
in mind. When nothing else works, what do you do?
So Jennifer Levins says that she has a child with an IEP, and he rolls on the floor, lays on other children, and has difficulty focusing. Do you have any suggestions?
I think that children with IEP, you're going to have to work pretty closely with their therapist or with the parents about what works best for them, and I guess it makes a difference in their learning style and what their IEP is for, what strategies might work. But it is additional challenging behavior, or it is additional stress to challenging behavior when you have a child on an IEP. I mean, sometimes there's some assistance. If you can have a lower ratio, that really helps. But just working closely with the therapist and the parent about what techniques really work for that specific child.
All right, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Daisy Barges says that she has a student that whines when he doesn't get his way. Mom says he's not like that at home. What do I do?
Right. Well, probably there's not 10 other children at home vying for mom's attention, and that's why he doesn't do it at home. But, whining is one of those things that you can ignore, right? So if he comes up and says, Timmy hit me, say, I'm sorry, and just walk away. I mean, obviously, you don't ignore anything that's a health and safety situation, but if it's just whining to get attention or tattling, which 4-year-olds love to do, you can ignore that. And once you ignore it, then they don't get the attention out of it. And then they realize, well, this isn't working. So they'll, tend to do it less, hopefully.
All right. I know I'm going to mispronounce this name, but Ewa Brown, she says logical consequences of bad behavior trigger very aggressive behavior towards friends and teachers by a 4-year-old. Any advice? And it happens a few times a day.
So I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but logical consequences are when a teacher puts into place, if you do this, then this is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So, if you throw blocks, you pull a child out and you sit with the child and you watch and you say, see how the children are stacking blocks. And you have to spend time with the children. We don't pull them out and just say, go sit out. You need to take a break. We take a break with them and we say, this is what's appropriate. And we give them another chance to go back in and play blocks. You might have to do that 2 or 3 times. But at some point, you're probably going to say, if you continue to throw blocks, then you're going to have to leave the block area until this afternoon, and then you can try again. But you have to be really consistent, and you have to spend that time guiding them to what is the appropriate behavior you want to see. It takes time, and you don't always have that time. And I know that's where it becomes frustrating, but be consistent and take time with them to tell them what the appropriate behavior is that you want.
All right. Kim Maxwell says, when a child does not want to transition to the next activity, what should I do? Sometimes I get told no by the child, or the child refuses to move in line with everyone else. My aide usually walks with them. I don't want more children to not transition. What can you do to help me?
Yeah, I think you need to really tune into what makes that child tick and what they're interested in. You know, can they help you with something? Can they hold something for you? Can they be the line leader? Can you find some kind of a distraction that they enjoy? Can we pretend to be a choo-choo train, or can we, you have to look at what makes that child tick and what interests them, and then kind of, customize your transition activities to help that child move. Sometimes you have to ask for assistance. You're right. Sometimes we have to help guide them or take their hand gently and have them come along with us. But, sometimes you need help because your rest of your group is moving along and you can't stay back with that child. So finding what interests them the most, it's sometimes a challenge to do that, but keep diligent with it. Keep trying. You'll find something.
All right, fantastic. All right, Sherry Dickens says, I'm a specials teacher working with grades 4K through 6. I work with the kindergarten, first and second grade for 35 minutes, 2 times every day, 6 days. Plus, I am able to push into classrooms when we have projects that relate to my subject area, which is agriculture. I'm really struggling with establishing a safe and effective learning space. It seems like when I redirect or quietly address one situation, others get off task. It has left these classes feeling really chaotic and out of control. Any suggestions?
Wow. So yeah, I mean, obviously, classroom design, the way the environment set up is going to help a lot with that. And I don't know if you have control over that or not, but maybe that at that age you can empower the children to help you with it. What would make this better? What would you guys like to see in the classroom? And try to incorporate some of their ideas into it, because just like with anybody, if we're asked a question and we get to give our answer and our suggestions, we're more apt to do it and embrace it if it has something to do with what we suggested. So with that age group, I would think that you could really sit down and ask them, how can we figure this out? But that's a wide age span, so I could see that would be a little bit challenging. Work with other teachers, setting up the environment and making sure those rules are in place and they're followed, though. And that age group understands that. So those two things right there will probably make a big difference.
Okay. All right. Do you have time for a couple more questions, Jody, or do you need to
I
run?
do. No, I do have time.
Fantastic. All right. So Francesca Fava says, I have a boy in my class who starts running around and pinching other children during transitions. Sounds like me whenever I was in kindergarten. I'm just kidding. So what did Francesca do to alleviate this situation?
That's what I call the spirited child, right? We were
Right.
talking about that earlier. So, to obviously pinching and hitting and biting, that's attention getting. That child really probably feels disconnected. Mrs. Porter is conscious discipline says that disconnected children are discouraged children, right? So finding a job for that child to do, what could he do, or what could he hold? Giving him a squishy ball and just, reminding him that we don't do this with our hands, we do this with our hands. It feels like pinching is kind of a release, right? So making sure that there's Play-Doh and there's sensory things that he can pinch and he can hit and he can pound might take a little bit of the edge off, and just redirecting that. No, we don't pinch our friends, but look at what I have over here that you can pinch and you can poke and you can pound. Just directing it to something else that he can do, that maybe physical release that he's looking for by pinching.
Great idea. All right. Let's see here. I am currently a new preschool special education teacher going on 2 weeks in. Oh, wow. I have a few students who are dominant in some aggressive behaviors. Am I best to keep them separate during centers or work on trying to allow them to work together? Also, how to keep them separated since there are 16 total students. This is by Genya Martin.
Right. So sometimes it is better to kind of separate children and put them in groups where there's children that are modeling the appropriate behavior, keeping them, the children that feed off of each other, right? So if you can separate them in some way, maybe create groups that are the teddy bears and the kittens, or, I don't know what age we're talking about here, but the red group, the blue group, and keeping them separated. But eventually they're going to be together somewhere, probably out on the playground, maybe sitting at a table together, and, work with them in that situation. But when you're really looking at some focused learning, you're probably going to want to create smaller groups with them, not in the same group. Obviously, if you have a lot of them, they're going to end up a couple of them being in the same group, but 2 in a group or 5 in a group is going to be a big difference. So
Sure.
I would try separating them if you can, and also looking at their various learning styles and making sure that you're meeting their needs, where they're at developmentally.
Okay.
And
Then
thinking
under,
about why are they doing that, right? Are they stressed? Are they disconnected? How can you connect with children? How can you connect children to children? And making sure there's activities that connect them, partner activities.
fantastic. All right, we're going to do one more question here because I know that you've got to run and we've got to end this webinar. So Jenna Marinelli says, what would you suggest when you have siblings in the same room if they are out of control?
Right, siblings. So siblings are really comfortable with each other. So when you can separate them, kind of like the other group we just talked about, giving them an opportunity to shine on their own without being overshadowed by the other siblings. So putting them in separate groups or giving them different kind of jobs. Once again, tune into their learning style and their interests, and then give them jobs to do or activities to do that really let them shine. So each of them has an opportunity. I'm guessing there's competition between them. And that maybe that's something that's carried over from home. So looking at them as individuals, as if they're not even siblings, right? And making sure you're meeting them at their level and at their needs. But if you can separate them, that just gives them an opportunity to be, be empowered and not be overshadowed by one another.
Very
I
good.
would say. All right.
Well, Jody, thank you so much for sharing your talents with us this afternoon. Afternoon here, but I know that we had quite a few people from around the globe sharing this webinar with all of us, and I know that by reading the comments on the left-hand side, that there were many, many, many happy peeps out there that are ready and willing to put together some of these great ideas to use in their classroom. So thanks so much, Jody. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, well, if you missed the Frog Street Annual Splash Conference in Grapevine, Texas, the big one, they are doing a couple of mini conferences on both coasts, one in Newport Beach, California, and one in Kissimmee, Florida, right next to Disney World. So if you're looking for an excuse to go to Disney World, this would be it. So Splash 2020 East Coast, they're going to keep that same theme, launching into the future. These are smaller renditions or versions of the big splash that happens in the summertime, but still going to be all the fun and all the learning and all the presenters. So be sure and sign up for these if you are on one of those coasts. We'd love for you to join us. Of course, we want to thank you for attending the webinar today. You know that Frog Street puts these on through the school year almost every month, and we definitely want to thank Jody for bringing her professionalism and her ideas to us today. Jody, again, thank you so much. And there is some information right there that if you would like to ask Jody some questions, you can reach her at jmartin@frogstreet.com. If you are not able to get this email address before I flip slides, then you can always go to Frog Street's telephone number, call them and say, hey, can you hook me up with Jody? I'd like to talk to her. So they'll be happy to help. Again, we would invite you to join the Early Childhood Learning Solutions community, which is sponsored by Frog Street. It is a totally free resource to you. And as we said earlier, there are many, many benefits, such as you're able to view the edWebinar recordings, both present and past, earn certificates, download slides and chat logs, join online discussions. If you have a question, something maybe pertaining to today's webinar, you can always float that out there for other early childhood professionals around the globe to look at and answer. So we would love for you to join. And that concludes our webinar today. Thank you so much for being with us. Be sure and look for the next webinar, which will probably be sometime in October. And we invite you to join us for that. Everybody, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again, Jody.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.